President Erdoğan slammed Biden in the U.S. magazine Newsweek. U.S. administration gives the biggest support to Israel. President Erdoğan, who went to the U.S. capital Washington, answered the questions of Newsweek magazine. Criticizing U.S. President Biden for the Israeli massacre in Gaza, President Erdoğan said, killing innocent people in hospitals, ambulances, and marketplaces where they go for treatment is the gravest violation of human rights. However, the U.S. administration ignores these violations and gives the biggest support to Israel. President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, who is in the U.S. capital Washington for the NATO Summit, gave an interview to Newsweek magazine. President Erdoğan stated that Turkey's main goal is to strengthen solidarity with its NATO allies and find sustainable solutions to the problems threatening the region and the world with common sense. We are for peace in the Russia-Ukraine war. Responding to a question about the potential for a direct confrontation between NATO and Russia, President Erdoğan recalled that Turkey had declared from the beginning that it would not take sides in this war. Our stance is only pro-peace. The solution is a lasting peace achieved through dialogue, not more bloodshed and suffering, stating that the situation has caused more harm than good for Ukraine and that Turkey is in dialogue with both countries to move closer to peace. President Erdoğan continued. By bringing the parties together in Antalya and Istanbul, we facilitated the creation of a critical dialogue path to resolve the issues. The Black Sea Grain Initiative and our grain shipments from there were much more than just an economic and logistical activity. We do not believe that limiting this war to the victory or defeat of one side is the solution. We believe the solution lies in dialogue and diplomacy, emphasizing that bloodshed and destruction of settlements will not bring lasting peace. President Erdoğan said, the possibility of a direct confrontation between NATO and Russia is undoubtedly worrying. Any steps that could lead to this outcome should be consciously avoided. We think it is appropriate to approach the issue with a solution-oriented approach and in a measured manner. To the question about his diplomacy with Russian President Vladimir Putin despite being on opposite sides of the conflicts in Syria, Libya, and even to a certain extent in Ukraine, President Erdoğan responded as follows. We advocate a principled approach in all the areas you mentioned. We approach problems with sincere and realistic roadmaps, not with principles based on hidden agendas and emotional reactions. We move forward by speaking out loud about what is right and wrong. It is impossible to move forward in sensitive processes without a calm approach, stating that Turkey approaches problems with a perspective that emphasizes solutions, not a policy that is captive to prejudices. President Erdoğan said, naturally, Mr. Putin and I do not agree on everything. However, we can discuss the issues among ourselves and go into details on how to solve them, called to Biden on FET. Asked about his relationship with U.S. President Joe Biden on various issues in U.S.-Turkey relations such as sanctions, FET, and human rights, President Erdoğan said, first of all, the structure led by the FET ringleader in the United States is not an innocent movement. It is a terrorist organization, just like the DAESH, which has carried out terrorist acts in various parts of the world. Both Daesh and FET kill people. Both Daesh and FET exploit people's religious feelings. Both Daesh and FET aim to harm the countries they operate in. FET aims to infiltrate the governments of the countries it operates in and take control of the system. This includes the United States. We have explained the dangers of this organization to the U.S. presidents with concrete evidence. However, Mr. Biden and I have different views on this issue. Harsh reaction to Biden for Gaza. Stating that he and Biden also have different views on human rights, President Erdoğan said about Israel's attacks on Palestine. We believe that the brutal killing of innocent people by Israel in hospitals, ambulances, marketplaces, centers where humanitarian aid is distributed, and in areas defined as safe is the gravest violation of human rights. However, the U.S. administration turns a blind eye to these violations and provides Israel with the greatest support. It does this at the expense of being complicit in these violations. Pointing out that the fight against terrorism is another source of concern, President Erdoğan continued as follows. We are a NATO country. The threat to our national security is a threat to all NATO countries, especially the United States. In fact, the agreements that led to the establishment and the continued existence of NATO prove this. However, the support given by the U.S. and some of our other allies to the terrorist organizations PKK, PYD, YPG, and FETO, which threaten our security, is incompatible with these principles of NATO. We have expressed our concern about the weapons and support given to these terrorists on every platform. We would like the support of our allies in the fight against these terrorists, but we do not see it in full. President Erdoğan pointed out that the U.S. and Turkey can agree on some issues and said, after all, we are two allied countries. We have developed a relationship with Mr. Biden in relation to the issues we agree and disagree on between our countries. We can talk about a relationship that oscillates between periods of calm and turbulence, stating that they have always maintained sincerity in their relations with Biden and that they take care to develop their friendship. President Erdoğan said Turkey and the United States are two allies with long-standing relations. We have deep-rooted ties and we intend to develop them. When asked about Turkey's diversification of its global relations as a NATO member, its relations with BRICS and Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and whether it will become a member of these organizations, President Erdoğan replied that it would be misleading to approach these issues with the logic of the Cold War period and that we no longer live in Cold War conditions. To the question about the events in Gaza, President Erdoğan said, "The situation between Israel and Gaza is not a war. It is Israel's attacks that disregard human rights and international law and ultimately lead to massacres. Palestinians in Gaza are simply defending their homes, their streets, and their homeland." For days, Israel has been deliberately targeting civilian infrastructure in Gaza where civilians live and take refuge. We have opposed this from day one. The situation between Israel and Gaza is not a war, but an aggression that leads to massacres. Pointing out that Israel's attacks on Gaza did not start on October 7, 2023, President Erdoğan said, "For years, Israel has treated Gaza as an open-air prison. They usurp Palestinian homes, businesses, and agricultural lands by using thieving terrorists they call settlers. Think about it. Someone comes to your house with an Israeli soldier, throws you out and tells you that your house now belongs to them. This is what is happening in Palestine. Israel has been practicing systematic state terrorism in the Palestinian territories for years. Israel violates international law. What happened to the UNSC resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza? Israel did not even care about this resolution, let alone implement it. Who is going to sanction Israel for violating international law, and what kind of sanctions? That is the real question, and no one is answering it. We want these attacks to stop immediately. We want Israel to withdraw from Gaza, and we want humanitarian aid to reach Gaza without interruption. We demand the implementation of a two-state solution based on the 1967 borders for a lasting peace in the region. Israel's threats against the countries of the region, especially Lebanon, and its attempts to spread conflicts to the region must end. Otherwise, our region will face the risk of deeper conflicts and even war." Asked about Turkey's vision for resolving the Syrian crisis and the U.S. military presence in the region, President Erdoğan said, "We are the nation most affected by the conflict in neighboring Syria. The U.S. is supporting terrorists, not the Kurds in Syria. We support the Syrian Kurds and protect their rights. The PKK, PYD, YPG terrorist organization carries out terrorist acts in the region under the guise of the SCF. It persecutes especially Syrian Kurds. It is these U.S.-backed terrorists who threaten and expel Kurds, Arabs, and Turkmens in the region. The PKK, PYD, YPG terrorist organization uses the support given under the pretext of fighting Daesh to attack Turkey and Syria. We are the ones who are really fighting Daesh. We are the only NATO ally engaged in close combat with Daesh. We are striving for a climate of peace in Syria. The solution to all these conflicts is a new social cohesion in Syria on the basis of territorial integrity. Our fundamental desire is for Syria to be a prosperous state, completely free of terrorism and governed by Syrians, not a piece of land where regional and global powers are arm wrestling. For those who think they can create a terrorist state, this is a dream and will never come true. Regarding whether there is enough support from NATO against the presence of terrorist organizations and instability in Syria, President Erdoğan said, in Iraq and Syria, there are terrorists, not Kurdish rebels, alongside Daesh. They do not represent any ethnic or religious group. Both terrorist organizations directly represent terrorism and its heinous aims. We have no problem with the Kurdish population in Syria or Iraq. We have a problem with terrorists, and we are very close to solving this problem by neutralizing them. For those who think they can establish a terrorist state in our region, this is a dream and will never come true. When the day comes, our Syrian guests will voluntarily return to their countries, leaving the war behind. We will increase our efforts for this purpose, noting that unfortunately some NATO allies have unfortunately witnessed approaches and actions that make Turkey's job more difficult rather than supportive. President Erdoğan said, "We continue to keep the situation under control inside and outside our borders, and to implement our solution strategy by intervening when and to the extent necessary."